So welcome everyone. I'm Becky with Malvern Books, and we're so excited to be hosting tonight an event in celebration of the launch of a wonderful new book called The Strange Inheritance of Leah Fern by Rita Zoey Chin. And in conversation with Zoe tonight, we have Cecily Saylor. So I'm going to be doing a brief introduction, and then we'll have a wonderful time listening to the reading and the interview. Cecily Saylor is a creative coach and founder of Typewriter to Row, which offers guidance and inspiration for creative spirits. Prior to launching Typewriter to Row, Cecily earned an MFA in fiction from the University of Houston and worked for 10 years running the community-based literary arts program for people of all ages. Her writing and reporting on books, Texas history, and social care have appeared in Dallas Morning News, Texas Monthly, Austin Fit Magazine, the Texas Observer, and Resolve Magazine. Our featured writer tonight is Rita Zoey Chin, the author of the widely praised memoir, Let the Tornado Come. She holds an MFA from the University of Maryland, is a recipient of the Catherine Ann Porter Prize, an Academy of American Poets Award, and a Bread Loaf Scholarship. She has taught at Towson University and at Grub Street in Boston. Her work has appeared in Guernica, Tin House, and Marie Claire. The Strange Inheritance of Leah Fern is her first novel.
Let's see. Hello, I am muted. Zoe, you'll probably need to come off mute as well. I am so excited to be facilitating this conversation. I loved this book so much as a creative witch, an earth witch, a weirdo, a previously lost soul. This book was so special and dear and beautiful to me. And Zoe, congratulations on bringing this into the world. Thank you for bringing it here. I thought I would start by just asking, well, first I wanted to say that I have two tarot decks here with me. I'm also a tarot reader. So at any point in the conversation, Zoe, if you would like me to pull a card, let me know. I might just pull them as you're answering questions and ask you if you want to hear what they are. So that's part of the mix if you want it to be. And then we will try to save a little time at the end of the hour for a couple audience questions. We're going to have you put those in the chat first. So just be prepared for that. And I think we're ready. So Zoe, I wanted to start by asking how this story came to you and how it first entered your consciousness, and how did you know it was yours to bring into the world?
That's a great question. And thank you for this evening for reading my book and your kind words. And I'm excited to be having this conversation with you. And thank you, Becky, for hosting it. I've been asked this question a few times now, and I always started by saying, well, it started this one way, which I'll tell you in a minute, but it actually, I feel like I've been writing this book my whole life, which is strange because I wrote a memoir, and you would think that that would be the book I was writing my whole life, but it isn't. It's this book, and it deals with a lot of the things that I sort of came into the world, like my first memories, of just being aware, my fascinations with animals, with magic, with witches. I used to dream about witches when I was a child, and not the wicked witch you see in the Wizard of Oz, the witches that were always shown. I dreamed of a little white house of 5 witches, and I had a lot of nightmares as a child. And occasionally I would start to fall asleep, and I would be in this field, and I would come upon this little white house, and I would knock on the door, and the witches were inside, and I would ask them to give me good dreams, and they would. And so, this is the first time I'm actually really answering this question in the most real and honest way I can answer it. And it's not that I wasn't honest before, but I'm just realizing now talking, so it must be you because you're pulling out these deeper answers. So in terms of the actual, okay, here's my novel, and I'm going to start writing it. It did happen about 8 years ago. I was in my living room, and I saw this flash out of the corner of my eye, and I immediately thought, a bird. And I don't have a bird, and it was inside. And I knew it wasn't a bird, but I still thought, it still made me think that it was. And I started wondering, what if there was someone who could see birds that other people couldn't see? And that got me thinking a lot about how a lot of people see birds as messengers or as the departed coming back, and then so it's very interesting to me. Around that same time, I was thinking a lot about what it means to be an empath. And I mean, we all, I think, are to varying degrees, are empathic, some of us more than others. But someone who, and I struggle with it, honestly. Sometimes my therapist tells me you have to have a semi-permeable membrane, not be completely open. And I'm working on that. But I wondered about someone who was just an empath to the absolute extreme. And I was thinking also about legacies, about inheritances, and the kinds of things we leave behind, not just physical objects, although I was interested in that too. And I used to I kind of like this idea, and I've told people this, but of leaving precious gems or precious objects to strangers, so that if somebody's riding along, on the subway and gets handed something beautiful, and it's theirs to take home. But also the kinds of, do we leave a legacy of love? Do we leave a legacy of kindness? Do we leave a legacy of magic? What do we leave? So all of those things kind of started to merge together, and this book began.
Okay. Thank you for sharing part of your own magical experience of the world. That was definitely a question I wanted to get to. Did you research witchery, or has it been with you for a long time? And I also love any story of a magical moment, a flash in the room, dreams, witches' houses in the woods, So I did pull a card as you were talking and got Ace of Pentacles, and this is the Wild Unknown deck. And I'll just say that to me, this really feels like it was there with you from the beginning, maybe it was always a seed inside you. And maybe it was a matter of time before you were prepared to really bring it into the world. And thank the goddess you did. I want to say, just because the book is newly out, so I also want to give people a little bit of information about the book. There's been, you can read about it on the events page, but this is a novel about a young woman named Leah Fern, who grew up in a carnival in Alabama with her mother, and amongst a bunch of very weird, strange people who were on display for their weirdness. And she became the youngest and very best fortune teller in the world, and used her empath abilities to give readings to people. And her mother, at one point when she's young, drops her off with a man and never comes back for her. And thankfully that man is kind and good to her. And around her 21st birthday, she is actually thinking of she's preparing to end her own life. Her empath abilities, her abandonment from her mother, and then her kind of fill-in father, Edward Murphy, has also passed away, and her empathic skills have kind of alienated her from the world, because when she touches other people, she can feel whatever they're carrying very intensely. And also she's just a weird bird, and a lot of her peers don't get her, and she's not interested in the stuff they're interested in. And instead of going through with this death ritual, she receives this strange inheritance. And in the literal sense, in the opening of the novel, it's this beautiful urn containing the ashes of a neighbor in her building. And it comes with a letter and some instructions that are going to send her on this journey, following in the footsteps of 5 witches who did 9 full moon rituals in a spiralic shape around the country to heighten their own creative power. And so Leah going on this journey, there's a promise that it's going to help her understand what's happened to her mother. And since you brought up inheritance, I want to come back to that. And there's that, that urn that she receives at the beginning. And there's so much more that she comes to inherit over the course of the novel. And there's some things on my list that I think she also inherits, but I wanted to ask, what else is her inheritance? And similarly, is there anything in your inheritance or lineage that you want to honor or acknowledge tonight?
Wow. Let's see. I'll start with Leah. It's easier. That's a great question. I'm actually very curious to hear what you think she inherits. It's funny because I've had this conversation with people close to me who have read it. What does she inherit? Beyond the obvious. And by the way, you described the book beautifully, better than I think I do. I would say that she inherits, Essie, who writes her these letters, who knew her mother for a time, has some regrets. And she gives her one bit of advice, and that is have the courage to love. And that she comes by that advice quite painfully, actually. And she falls in love with one of the other women in the coven, and the love is reciprocated, but because Essie is such a gnarled person, she's not able to let herself go to it. And so this is her life's regret. And so she gives Leah this one bit of advice. And so I would say Leah inherits love, but maybe, it's that she actually finds the love within, that she's stuck, right? Her mother has left her. And the problem is that, when somebody leaves and they're never coming back, you can grieve them. But when somebody says, I'll be back soon, you're always waiting. And so Leah grows up kind of in this purgatory where she can't move on, and she can't grieve, because grieving would mean that her mother's not coming back, and she's not willing to accept that. So I would say that, through these letters, she learns what Essie knows of her mother, and that gives her a certain kind of freedom to be able to move on from. I'm afraid of giving things away, and I probably already have. Forgive me, but
you've done a good job. There's a beautiful convergence and surprise in this novel. So I think it is good to protect the sacredness of that surprise for people. So I saw her also inheriting history, like her being left by her mother kind of disrupts her connection to a kind of history, and she doesn't really also know that much about her mom's origins. She's inheriting the stories that Essie is passing on as she leaves her another letter at each of these subsequent post office boxes that are like strewn miles and hundreds of miles away from each other. She comes into a creative lineage, a magical lineage. And I think there's something really powerful going on for her, because she couldn't really befriend anyone. She didn't have women in her life, or even girls in her life, that she could relate to or make herself in the image of, which is a power that she has later. But she seems to come into a kind of sisterhood of some kind, even if not all of these women are physically present for her. But there's the little earthly objects that are passed on, these photographs, art items, and so many beautiful things. And anything you want to mention about your own inheritance, or anything you want to honor in that regard?
Well, so yes, and I do want to add one more thing too, because I think that what you're talking about with the sisterhood is really key. And Essie, one of the things she gives her with each letter is a photograph, but it's printed on transparency paper, so you can hold it up and you see the past, and through the past you see the present at the same time. And, there's this, as she gets to know, what she really wants when she embarks on this journey is she doesn't really care about what happened to Essie. or these 5 women who practiced these 9 full moon rituals in 1977. She just wants to know, just give me my mother, right? That's what she wants. But she does, after a while, it starts to feel like time maybe blurs a little bit, and she does become part of that coven, and she ends up having a relationship with a dead woman, and that's something that I really enjoyed watching develop as the novel, grew. Was like, oh wow, it's happening. These across the veil, it's happening. But in terms of my own inheritance, I would say that everything is fodder, right? So I actually didn't inherit a lot of good from my biological parents. Anybody who reads my memoir will know this. It was a very dark childhood for me because of them. But how I feel about it is that, I got to be an alchemist, and I got to take that and turn it into something else. I got to throw it into that dark matter where creativity, comes from, and make art with it. So that's what they gave me, and that's my inheritance, I guess. But
yeah. I pulled a couple cards around this as we were talking, and one is this is from the Wild Unknown Oracle deck. This is the Empty Room, which I thought is a really interesting answer, and I see this kind of as like a new portal, like by the end, whereas I think Leah can't imagine a life for herself in this world of like normal people. And she's been very sheltered. She's been in this one small town, like since her mother brought her there to stay with Edward Murphy. And this road trip takes her out into the world. And at first she has to like cross the state line, and this is a big deal. But then she's like crossing the American border into Canada, and all of this like opens the world for her. And I feel like by the end, she's able to begin to imagine a life for herself that's made from like her own magic. And the Empty Room is kind of a place where she can create whatever she wants. And also the King of Wands, who is a very powerful alchemist, a leader, someone who is very much in their passion, connected to what matters to them, and kind of leading from that place. So, and I certainly think you've made a book from things that are obviously very dear to you and important to you. And I thought maybe we could go next to the spiral, which is a big element in this book, a bit of sacred geometry. And one way it functions, of course, is that the coven marked all of their 9 ritual sites using a Fibonacci sequence created spiral. And so there's that's like Leah will travel to these different sites that are on the spiral that they mapped. And then I feel like the spiral and the circle are really important for witches and for like those who are getting into their feminine power, because it takes us out of this like linear kind of thinking and this rational kind of emphasis. Like we live in a world that's like things should always get more and get better, and there should be progress, and like anything else is going backwards, and like that's a sign of failure. And what I've learned in like connecting with other witches is that like life is a spiral, and sometimes you're circling through your past even as you're moving into the future. And you also use it as a beautiful way to kind of blend time. So we see Leah on this road trip, we see her back at the carnival when she was young, we see her at Edward Murphy's, and at different stages of her coming of age. And sorry, I'm talking so much, but what power does the spiral hold for you, and how did it help you in constructing the novel?
Well, it's interesting because I knew that the witches would travel a path that was directed by sacred geometry, but I didn't know the shape. And I was struggling with it. I was kind of just, brainstorming, and my partner is used to me in the mornings, sitting there with a cup of tea and going, okay, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. And he said, well, what about a golden spiral? And I said, oh my gosh, that's it. I just knew immediately that was it. And I've always been drawn to spirals, so I don't know why I didn't think of it. I would have. But one of the things I love about the spiral is that well, number one, this particular spiral, and I guess all logarithmic spirals, they go on forever, they would be infinite, but it's based on that number phi or phi, I guess, if you're not a frat house, is how you say it, which is an infinite number. It's also the most irrational number. And so it's a number that we can't even hold. It defies our ability to work with it as a number, which I kind of love. But as it spirals out, it's also always spiraling in, and I love that, because it really reflects one of my core beliefs, which is that everything is connected, and that so the great wide infinite universe is you, and it is me. And so and I do like the non-linear, that we're connected to everything, but also time for me is not linear
Right.
at all. And so I think the spiral reflects that as well.
Yeah, I love it. And I also, just as a writer and someone who coaches writers, just the way you manage that structure and kept it both tight and flexible as a spiral, and that was my perception of it, is incredibly impressive, and hopefully a model to other writers too. Very beautifully done, I thought. I would like to talk about witches now, and there's a passage on page 235, or in my copy of the book, there's a passage that I'd love for you to read. And the book doesn't open with any, this isn't like the witches sort of enter into this quietly and start to sort of take up more space, and then there's more of a question about what a witch is and what magic is, but it doesn't open from the very beginning in this kind of declarative witch with her broomstick kind of situation. And so I'd like to talk with you about what witches are and how you think of them, but maybe we'll start with this passage that Leah asked this question.
Absolutely. I've not ever read this out loud, so forgive me if I stumble. Leah placed her backpack onto a small desk. So I guess she's in a library and she's researching. I should just give a little bit of context here. She's researching witchcraft and what a witch is, because Essie is a witch. And I think, Cecily, what you're saying about what is a witch, depending on who you ask in society, I mean, you'll get a lot of different answers. So yeah. Leah's trying to figure it out for herself. So she's in a library and in Canada, in Thunder Bay. Leah placed her backpack onto a small desk facing a window that overlooked Thunder Bay and began with a single word: witch. Most of what's known of witches had come from her earliest impressions, the stories of winged witches told by the puppet beasts, the Wicked Witch from the Wizard of Oz, the craggy black cutouts of witches tacked to windows each Halloween. The Oxford English Dictionary offered another view: a female magician, sorceress, a woman supposed to have dealings with the devil or evil spirits, and by their operation to perform supernatural acts. She thought of her mother and wondered why a female magician was called a witch, while a male magician was simply called a magician. According to other sources, however, the Oxford English Dictionary had it wrong. Magic has nothing to do with the supernatural. And witches have nothing to do with the devil. What is a witch? A shaman, a small fleck of light you never saw. Essie's voice trailed through her mind. Depending on the book she opened, a witch might be a beautiful seductress, a wretched crone, a healer, a guardian of the earth, a polytheist, an animist, an artist, a feminist, a naturalist, an ecologist, a Jungian archetypalist, an herbalist, an aromatherapist, a mythologist, a ritualist, a necromancer, a spellcaster. Some are lone practitioners while others participate in covens, sometimes in large organizations and sometimes in small homegrown groups with as few as 3. Some covens are assembled around a high priestess and a priest, while others are all female. But almost universally, covens are led by women, and almost all witches, whether practicing in covens or alone, are guided by and in relationship with the natural world. They use amulets, herbs, candles, tarot cards, brews, crystals, daggers, chalices, wands, salt, poems, and yes, even brooms to celebrate, honor, and invoke almost everything imaginable. But whatever ways a witch identifies with her craft, she usually keeps it secret. Leah had already learned some of this from Essie's letters, but now she saw how she could spend years studying the myriad incarnations of witchcraft all over the world, not to mention the history of witch hunts, which spans centuries. Overwhelmed, Leah remembered something Essie had written in one of her letters. We're a people of ritual, of symbolism. We make wishes upon birthday candles and stars. And she wondered then if maybe, if one peeled away the many books and definitions, the many interpretations and expressions, they'd find a single tribe of people who shared a simple impulse: to believe in magic.
To believe in magic. Do you identify as a witch?
I do.
Okay. Do you have like little spins on that, like a word witch, or you're just like witch, I'm a witch?
I just have to say, I resist labels a lot. People are like, what kind of book is this? Is this magical realism? Is this speculative fiction? Is it and I think, are you a poet? Because I started my writing career as a poet, and then I wrote a memoir, and are you a memoirist? Are you a fiction? I'm a writer, I'm a witch. And I don't I like to keep it open because I feel that labels can close doors. And, today I might be working with candles, and tomorrow I might be working with something else. I might be working with language or words or paper or herbs. And so I think that, I don't follow, my craft is very much intuitive. I don't follow books. I don't have spell books that I buy at bookstores. I really follow that intuitive, my 5 witches. Maybe I follow them.
Yeah, that's right. You have that lineage to step into, and I honor and agree with the resistance to labels, but was curious if you would call yourself such. And I ask, because calling myself a witch or saying that in front of a Zoom room full of people is not something I would have done 6 years ago, much less like 20, I was not having witch dreams, unfortunately, when I was a kid, but read a lot of ghost stories. But I wanted to kind of honor and spotlight the witch in this novel. And I think the way that you bring that archetype into the story, because there's like the very, witchy books will have a sort of commercialized version of the witch, or something that's maybe constructed in response to the stereotypes that we have. And I feel you do a really beautiful job, like opening up the proposition, and the way that you ended there, like a tribe of people who are willing to believe in magic, seems so true. And I saw it also playing out in this book as women who are not willing to give themselves over to the societal expectations of like kind of the mundane life of domesticity. You know, they're not doing 9-to-5 jobs. Many of them are artists, many of them are queer, some of them are bisexual, and without you really like spotlighting queerness in some like explicit kind of way. And I love this moment when Leah, late in the story, she's in Georgia, and she comes upon this group of elder witches who knew the coven back in the 70s. And they used to run an ice cream shop called the Banana Split. And we're like a secret coven in behind the scenes of the ice cream shop. And I was like, this is amazing. Ice cream and witches, so good. But also there's this moment of, I wanted to bring up the witch wound. And I think this is something that happens to Leah. Like when she's young, she's seeing all of these magical birds all around her that Edward Murphy can't see. And he gets worried about her, and he starts taking her in for testing. And there's this like pathologizing of Leah around like her reality and her vision of all of these beautiful birds. And because of that, the magic disappears. And I'm talking a lot again, but what would you like to say about this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because I think that, well, interestingly too, Edward Murphy, I will just say this, I think is the most domestic character in the book.
It's
more
true,
domestic
yes.
than
I love Edward Murphy, an amazing man, like wonderful man.
Thank you. Yeah, I love him too. He's kind, and he's hopelessly in love with Leah's mother. So the two of them kind of, that's how they bond, is they're both waiting for this woman they love to come back. I think that a lot of our creativity or our intuitive abilities kind of get like washed out of us. We're told that, and I think that happens a lot. I, like you, I don't walk around, saying that I'm a witch. I don't, I love that you asked the question, but it's just something I do, and I'm a lone practitioner.
Same.
Are you? I was wondering about that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and I think that kind of goes with writing. But yeah, I think that we're often told the way things should be, and because of that, we start to lose the. I think when we come in, we have. This is just me going off, and I apologize if anybody thinks I'm out there. But I thank you. I do think we come in with a lot more intuitive ability when we're young, and I think a lot of that goes away. And in this case with Leah, she is visited by these birds. She sees them, and otherwise nothing's wrong with her. She's going to school, she's getting good grades, she's not harming anyone, she's not harming herself. She's actually, for the first time since her mother's left, she's actually happy. Yeah. And Edward Murphy, who is a very, very good man and means well, says this isn't normal. This isn't normal. We need to fix it. And so I think that it's an interesting, I think it's a kind of representation of what happens all too often, how our creative impulses, especially female creativity, gets squashed by men. I'm not anti-men, but that does happen, I think.
Yeah, and I think that associated quality with masculinity of rationality and of like scientific thought and linear movement and things making sense intellectually, it subverts and oppresses the sort of like intuitive, just feminine knowing that so many of us have, that all of us have, even men have, I think. But yeah, so I think I just love that we see the toll that takes when someone is kind of got the magic pathologized or socialized out of them. And so much of Leah's journey is a reclaiming of that, even if she's not aware that that's what it is until later. But I also wanted to touch a little bit on this question that I think is at the center of the novel. And you alluded to it with the advice that Essie gives to Leah in the letter, like have the courage to love. And there's this other central question in the novel, which I think is, am I loved? And it's what Leah comes to understand as the baseline question that people are bringing into her tent when she is a young fortune teller. So even if they're asking about the future or in whatever way, what they're really wanting to know is like, am I loved? Am I worthy? Am I belonging? And I thought that was really, as a tarot reader, I was like, I think that's true. I think that is what people are asking. And it also becomes a question, and I think what we were just talking about is that the world kind of tries to divide us from that feeling of being loved through connections with nature or through all the trauma that our ancestors have been enacting on each other. And it seemed to come down to this question as well. It's like, am I willing to love myself? And I just found that to be incredibly poignant. And there's something sort of universal about like making a novel about love. Like there are many versions of that. But I think you do it in this really unique and magical way. And what conclusions maybe did you come to around this question of love and what it means for you and how it enters into your life?
Mm. Well, I read something on your website about, basically, life being a creative act. I think is that something to that effect. And I think that love is also a creative act. It's not a passive thing, right? I mean, you can say the words "I love you," but that's just the beginning. And you don't even have to say the words to love. So I think, again, growing up. So when I was young, like 3, I remember looking at my mother and thinking, why are you so unhappy? Like, how can I love you into happiness? And I think because I didn't grow up feeling love, I generated love. And I practiced yoga, and I had a yoga teacher once asked me, what am I dedicated to? What do I want to dedicate my practice to? And, think about that. She said, give it time. I was like, love. Like, I don't have to think about that. And so for me, that's my ultimate act of creativity is every day, putting love into the world. And the hardest part of that is loving myself. We'll get off of this Zoom call tonight and I will lie in bed and think about all the things I should have said and how many times I touched my hair. I'll think about all those things, right? And I won't love myself. And so it's something that I am working on. And I think for Leah, being abandoned, I think anyone who's abandoned, I won't speak for anyone, but most people who are abandoned, there's some part of them that thinks it's because of them, something they did, something wrong with them. I grew up thinking that something was wrong with me. My parents were just very violent, drug addicted, narcissistic people who had no business having children. But you think it's you, and so I think that's one of the most important parts of Leah's inheritance, is that she learns that it wasn't her.
Yeah.
And then she can begin that harder part of the love, which is turning that spiral inward.
Yeah. I wonder, like, reading about your memoir, which I haven't read yet, but now I plan to, maybe this is me taking too big of a leap, but I see some, at a glance anyway, I see echoes of Leah and probably your lived experience, at least in the early part of life, and also this coming into magic and reclaiming the self. And I wonder if your relationship with Leah and writing her story was an act of love for yourself as well. Does that feel true?
That's an interesting question. I think it was an act of love that I wrote. It would not directly, because I always say that I wish I were more like Leah. I think she's a little braver than I am, honestly. But the way that I was brave is by writing her story, I guess, and that was an act of self-love, I would say, to trust in that story that kept coming to me. And I will say this too, which is kind of interesting, and this is something I also don't talk about very often, but I was told early on when I was writing this book, somebody that I really admire read an early draft, and it's a person, in the publishing industry, and she said, well, take out the witches. I guess like a queer witch book isn't really like, maybe now it is something that is more saleable, but at that time, I don't think it was the kind of thing that people were thinking I should be writing. And she said, you can't have letters in a book. You can't have letters in a book. And this is somebody who I still admire very, very much. And it's her opinion. And it's, there's so much subjectivity in what we like in literature, right? There, I have an agent who actually seeks out epistolary work. So, but basically I wrote a whole draft of this book without the witch's story in it. And it wasn't the book I had wanted to write. But it went out on submission very briefly, and then I pulled it and said, it's not the book I wanted to write. Their story needs to be told. So I took it back and I wrote the story I wanted to write. And that was, I think that for me was the self-love, is like, you know what? What am I? If I'm not true to myself, then what am I? Right. And so I wrote the full story as I wanted to write it. And I thank you. And then at that point, then I was okay. I thought no matter what happens, because part of me was entertaining, because I've been learning how to metalsmith, and again, the alchemy and transformation, right? And so I thought, I'm just going to do that. And I'm not gonna write anymore, because I've already spent years writing this book. I'm not making any money writing this book. I have to do something. But I said, let me just do this, write the story as I wanted. And when it went out on submission, I was at peace. I thought, okay, whatever happens now, it's in the universe's hands. And universe, if this book should go out into the world, let it. And if it doesn't, I will accept it gracefully. And I feel at peace. So that's a really long answer to your question.
That's a beautiful answer. And I think it's really important for people to hear that, because writing is usually a pretty solitary activity. When we get feedback, we do take it very seriously, especially when it comes from someone who works in publishing, and it can really upend your plan and your commitment and your connection to your story. And when I'm coaching people, that's something I'm really trying to emphasize, is like, what do you want to say? And because some people can't even get out from the cloud of what the projections of what the publishers will think. And so I think it's really important that you share the thoughts and beliefs you were cultivating that helped you get through a long process of believing in the book and believing in your work, even when other people told you it needed to be different. So that's some powerful magic right there. Thank you. Let's see. I do want to talk a little bit, and we are running out of time almost. Let's talk a little bit for a second about creativity and magic, and how those two go together for you, how you see them as forces or practices. What do people misunderstand about these things?
Well, I mean, I feel in a way that all creativity is kind of a connection to the ultimate, creation. That's the answer that nobody has, right? I mean, you can, look in certain religions and they'll tell you what that answer is, but how the universe came from nothing, nobody can say. Nobody can say how that happened. And, and yet here we are, stardust incarnate. So I think I think you can make everything an act of creativity, and to me, that's always a sacred act. And I think that's what this coven of five, they were trying to connect to that most primal stardust, right? That explosion of stars that made us. That's creativity too, right? So I think that in terms of what people misunderstand, I don't know. I think I feel misunderstood most of the time. So it's like, take your pick on any day.
How much time you got,
yeah.
right?
What's that?
I said how much time you got, right? For what?
Exactly, right. Yeah. But as a, you're a writer too. I'm curious how you see that.
Something I try to convey to people is that, like, creativity, I like to think of creativity as like an energy or a force, or just like this thing that's bubbling around us. If we want to tap into it, it's not like a quality you either possess or you don't. It's an energy that you work with or channel or may visit you. And so a lot of people get angry at creativity, like it's disappointed them, or they haven't, it hasn't delivered on its promise or their expectations for it to help them live a life free of like corporate work or whatever. And so some of my work with people is really about like not that you shouldn't be angry about things, like anger is important and it has its own magic, but just that creativity is something we can channel and open to, and a co-conspirator with us if we want to see it that way. And I think when we have that more, I think it's just like more fun to think about it like that. And when we do, I think creativity is like, yeah, let's do some stuff, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that, yeah, I agree. And I think that, for me, it's not about ego at all. So I feel more visited, and, I start to hear, like, I'll hear a sentence, I'll hear dialogue, I'll hear someone's name, and I just try to get it down before it goes away. And I feel more just honored that it shows up, and that I so it's not like, look what I made. Right? I mean, I did work very, very hard for many years to make this, but I feel that a lot of that was about listening and getting quiet and hearing these stories that were there, and like you said, tapping into it. What did you call the hermit?
Yes, he's a deep listener. Yeah, I love that, deep listening. And it is an honor to have creativity visit us, and I think that's beautiful. Sorry if I cut you off there.
No, I love it. I love that you're pulling these cards. I've been writing them down.
Okay. I didn't speak to these. I'll do this really quickly. But when we were talking about witches, I got the Father of Swords. So this owl. I also love in this book, there are so many like little touches of magic. There's a scrying mirror. There's all these different power animals. There's these little like totems. There's the sacred geometry, talismans, numerology, goddesses of different lineages. Like liminal spaces are huge, and there's also, of course, an owl, very, very important to the witch. So this is the king of like the swords, and and then this card is important. This is the unseen, which of course witches are always working with. So I feel like this is sort of the king, the master, the intellect of working with the unseen, which I think is a great way to think about a witch. Okay, so I'm going to
magical reader.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, tarot cards were my gateway drug, so it all started here. And okay, two questions I'm going to combine a little bit. And if y'all in the audience have questions for Zoe, go ahead and start typing those in the chat and we will check those out. How did writing this book change you? And would you like to cast a spell and describe a future that you intend to inhabit? It can be near or far. Call in something if you like.
Okay. Wow. Okay, those are I'm
sorry.
traveling.
Like,
No. How did this book? The first question was how did this book change me?
Yes, writing. How did writing this book transform you, if it did?
How transform me? I mean, that's a great question because so much of the book is about transformation. I think I've learned now to not question that voice anymore that comes through, to not silence it. If somebody says, no, I don't think you should write about witches, or I don't think you should, exactly. So I'm stronger for writing this book, and I'm more committed than ever to magic, because so many magical things happened while I was writing. I mean, just, you call them coincidences, but again and again, and right, they're not coincidences, right? I don't think they are. But it's just been uncanny. It's been uncanny from 8 years going here. And so it's kind of reinforced my own dedication to living a magical life, and just being as true to myself as I can be. I tend, being, more of an empath, I tend to sometimes forget myself because I'm very concerned about how everybody else is feeling in a given moment. And so this book kind of brought me a little bit back home, which was great. I was writing magical books, and I also want to be, it's funny because I did an event yesterday, my sister went with me, and it was on the water, and we kind of stopped and sat on a pier, and I thought I need to be around water more. So that's just something I'm putting out there. So now we'll see if it happens. No pressure, universe.
Here's you. I believe it honors you, and especially with all the magic you're making in your life and sharing with others. Let's see, we have, and since you cast a spell, I must say, so be it, or better. So to kind of seal that magic. I see a question in the chat from Joanne. Do you enjoy driving so much that you would undertake a journey that covers almost the entirety of North America, as Leah does in this book, of course?
Okay, so that's my sister.
Okay.
Hi,
Joanne.
I don't. I do enjoy driving. I actually I have not taken this journey, Leah's journey. But I don't like driving on the highway. So if I take it, it's going to have to be a back road journey. So my sister was teasing me yesterday, you're going to have to take 14 months off of work to make this journey. But I do want to take the journey. I was going to send a wish to everybody who's here tonight, but I don't want to cast a spell for anyone else. But I do hope that anyone who's with us tonight, just want to add to that. If they want magic or whatever they're wanting, I hope that they can manifest it in their own lives. So that's my wish for the people here tonight as well. I just wanted to.
Beautiful. I am wearing.
Yeah.
Yes. Let the magic spread far and wide to all who are ready and willing to receive it. I like how you described the way that you make magic. I absolutely relate to that, and had no formal training or a particular teacher or pull spells from books, but really kind of create my own rituals, and they look different at different times. And sometimes it's micro magic, and sometimes it's something a little more involved, but very intuitive. And I think one thing that kept me from maybe attempting that earlier was that I thought you had to be very you had to have the training, or you had to have the structure and the formula and do it a certain way. But one thing that I think is so empowering about magic is that it teaches you to trust yourself and to follow the way that the magic wants to kind of be made by you. And we're so often told like how to do things the right way, such as this publishing person who almost thwarted your book. I'm not feeling good things for her, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so I'm glad you shared that as well. I'm glad you are just bringing magical thinking into the world. I felt very seen and very loved in reading this book. And I felt like it was made, I know it wasn't made just for me, but it felt like it was. And I know many others will probably feel that way as well. So I pulled a couple cards to kind of close things. One is the Seven of Pentacles, which is a card of really honoring the harvest, I think, that you've grown. It sounds like maybe you admitted to forgetting yourself a little bit sometimes, or not giving yourself the fullness of the love that you might give to others. And so I hope that this book tour is also a time where you get to really like honor what you've created with the magic that you practice and what you've co-created with the universe and your craftspersonship. This is just a really wonderfully crafted novel. Like, your craft is strong. So don't forget that. And then the poet came, and there's birds flying in this card, and it looks like a crystal ball a little bit. So I just wanted to share those with you.
Amazing. So I definitely need to schedule a session with you.
I would love to dish about magic for a lot longer with you. So yes, please, let's do this again. Any final questions from our friends here tonight? Thank y'all for coming. Thank you to Malvern for bringing this book into my life and giving me this opportunity to chat with Zoe. And you can find me, if you're interested in my work, at typewritertarot.com. I do creative coaching. I have workshops and classes, tarot readings. So I'd love to get to know some of the people here. And Zoe, what's next? Oh, and if you haven't bought this book, buy this book, treat yourself, buy it for your friends, buy it from Malvern. It's amazing. It's the best book I've read this year. So thank you, Zoe. Thank you for being with us.
I wanted to say real briefly, again, I'll add my thanks to that. Zoe, it's just wonderful having you here. And Cecily, you did a wonderful job. It was really intriguing and so interesting, and just really so enjoyable to have the two of you talk. It sounds like it worked out to be a beautiful pairing. I tip my hat to Kelsey Williams, who's the one who recommended, Cecily, that I ask you on this, and so I'm so pleased about that it worked out this way. I just wanted to mention that this event kind of kicks off Malvern Books' birthday celebration. Tomorrow is our 9th year. It's our 9th birthday. And so we're very excited about that. And so it kicks off a weekend of our 20% off sale for everything in the store. And on Saturday, all our proceeds are going to be donated to Avow, which used to formerly TARAL, and Planned Parenthood. So if you come by either day, we'd love to help you. And we have lots and lots of copies of Leah Fern, because I love this book so much. And I'm doing the ordering now. And so I ordered a whole boatload of them. So come by and get the book. Yeah. And so thank you all so much. And thank you everyone who attended. I certainly hope you enjoyed it as much or more than I did. I don't know how that's possible, but I hope you did. And I'm only jealous of those people who haven't had a chance to read this yet, because that they get to read it first again, because that was just so much fun. I'm looking forward to reading a second time. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
You too. Thank you. Thank you, Cecily.
Thank you, Zoe. So good to talk with you.